Welcome to the Franchise Woman podcast, where passion and purpose collide, profits are made, and relationships forged. I'm Rebecca Monet, CEO and Chief Scientist at Zorkel Profiles, along with my co-host, community advocate, speaker, author, and entrepreneur, Tracy Kawa. So our special guest today is Shelly Sun. Shelly is the founder and CEO of BrightStar Group Holdings, Inc., the parent company of BrightStar Care, BrightStar Senior Living, and BrightStar Care Homes. BrightStar Care provides medical and non-medical home health care and medical staffing services through a national network. BrightStar Senior Living and BrightStar Care Homes provides assisted living and memory care in a senior living community setting. As an active CEO, Shelley has taken her brand to new heights. Her leadership and the successes of her network have been nationally recognized over the years. BrightStar Care has consistently ranked among the fastest growing private companies in America by Inc. magazine and has made Entrepreneur magazine's Franchise 500 list for the last 13 years. BrightStar Care has also continuously ranked on Franchise Business Review's top franchise list, the Franchise Times top 400 list, and was named a top woman-centric business by Global Franchise Magazine, and a million other accolades that I could go on and on forever. Shelley, thank you for making time to have this conversation with us.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
Shelley, Rebecca and I are always fascinated with the origin story. I'd love to hear the origin story of BrightStar, and also curious how you got the name and if it ties any way into your last name being Sun.
So I'll take those one at a time. So my ex-husband and I were looking for care for our grandmother back in late 2001 and couldn't find a high quality company that offered both non-medical and non-medical care. And our grandmother needed both range of services. And so it kind of fell to me, as you know, it often does, to the adult daughters or daughters-in-laws or granddaughters to do that research and talk to a bunch of different companies. And I was struck by companies not like wanting to differentiate based upon quality or service, but just trying to quote a price and get off the phone as though price was all that mattered. And then only either offering the nursing services or offering the bathing and making a meal and those kind of services, which are more non-medical. And so sadly, we were not able to find those services. And our grandmother passed away early in 2002, even before we got married. We were engaged at the time. And so 6 months after losing Grandma Pat, I just kind of challenged my passion and purpose. And I'm trained as an accountant. I'm a CPA by background and never imagined being an entrepreneur. Kind of an accountant and the risk of being an entrepreneur typically do not go hand in hand. But I was so moved, and I started talking to more women, you know, in my kind of age group and maybe even 10, 15 years older as to what they were doing about their parents and grandparents. And it seemed like there was not this one solution that did medical and non-medical that was unapologetic as to price, so that they could pay their workers a fair and living wage, so that they could retain them and have the best workers who were going to be reliable and were going to have the compassion that was so important in that role. And so I took a chance and did a bunch of research and then opened BrightStar Care in October of 2002. And, you know, it's still my passion and purpose. Helping take care of those moms and dads, grandmas and grandpas. I want to make sure our locations are treating families as though they were our own family, and making sure that we're treating our caregivers with the recognition and development they deserve, because they're doing such an amazing thing to be taking care of our clients in such an intimate way. And, you know, it's been 20 years and I'm as passionate as I was on day one. I would say in like the last year, I think I've had new insights into just how special that bond and relationship is between a caregiver and their client, and how vulnerable our seniors have to be to accept help by those that are caring for them. I'm engaged to, a wonderful man. I've been on my own, as Rebecca's known, as a single mom for like, the last, 7-8 years, and finally met someone really special. And his mom was really near and dear to me. I've always loved seniors. I had the best relationship with my grandparents. So seniors have always had a special place in my life. And I got really close to Sean's mom over the last couple of years we've been together. And sadly, last May, we got a cancer diagnosis. And it progressed really rapidly. I'm just thankful. You never know like what you make time for, and sometimes you don't have time. And I run a busy business, and I've got seniors in high school, and but everybody in the family calls Sean's mom Grammy. Grammy wanted to go to Italy and see her granddaughter and bring her home from a semester abroad, and she couldn't have gone without someone to accompany her. And I went with her. I cleared my schedule. I landed from one flight from my BrightStar conference, and Rebecca probably knows like how exhausting those franchise conferences can be. 3 days in Vegas, drop my suitcase, pick up a different suitcase, go and get Grammy, and go to Florence for 4 days. And it was such a great time. And I'm so grateful that I did that. So no regrets, right? We always will have some, but I'm glad this is not one of them, and accompanied her. And then like 2 weeks later found out she had cancer. And so, 4 rounds of chemo, losing her, independence, getting weaker and weaker. And we had amazing, really special BrightStar Care aides helping take care of her and making sure she was getting her nutrition and eating. But she was very proud and very private. And one of her sons, my future brother-in-law, is a doctor, and she didn't want him to be involved in her bathing, and she didn't want the aides to do her bathing, even though they're very qualified. And so one day I was sitting there beside her, and I'm starting to realize, even though it's what we do, I'm like, Grammy, do you want a shower? She goes, oh, I'd love a shower. And I said, the aides will do that. She goes, yeah, I don't want them to. I said, Grammy, I hope I don't hurt you. I've never been trained to be able to take care of you in that way, but I'm willing to get in there and give it a chance if you want to take a shower. And try not to get choked up. But getting in there and providing that intimate type of care, heartwarming that she trusted me to do that. But I've employed hundreds of thousands of caregivers in my brand over the last 20 years. I've never known really what it's like to be a hands-on caregiver. I'm grateful for what they do, and I'm glad we can do it. But to actually be in that place, I think it gave me a whole new renewed passion and purpose as to how important our caregivers are, and that forming that bond allows them to offer care for someone who probably doesn't want it. They wish they didn't need it. And it puts them in such a vulnerable position to need it. It has renewed my belief in what we do, my passion for what we do. But I think as I've always operated with making sure we're taking care of our moms and dads, grandmas and grandpas, because it's so important. And that will always be true. But it also has made a renewed kind of focus on what are we doing for our caregivers? How are we helping them think about their career path? Can a caregiver become a nurse? Can a caregiver come into an office position within our branches? And how do we invest into them with career pathing? And so that's become kind of a new dual passion of mine as we head forward.
Oh my gosh, you almost made me cry there. Grammy sounds like such a wonderful, delightful woman, and you having an opportunity to spend that intimate time in Italy and create those beautiful memories with her, and even the showering experience. That's a beautiful memory. That is a beautiful memory. And then you've always known caregivers work hard, and this is a special relationship between their clients and themselves, but to experience it firsthand really brings it to light, and how valuable their role is and how important that role is for our seniors. So clearly this is where passion and purpose has collided, no doubt.
Very
right?
much so.
So I'm curious, you went from doing this yourself in Chicagoland, right, to meet a need. At what point did you say, I think I'll franchise? I mean, that's like a big leap. How did you decide to
Yeah.
do that?
Absolutely. So we started with one location in the Chicago metro area in 2002. By 2004, we'd opened a second and third. So we were replicating success. I think I always wanted to be able to get to other states. I mean, where Grandma Pat lived was Florida, and we were trying to do that remote from Illinois. So I wanted to be able to serve and have more of an impact. But did you have to take on external money, and could you keep the same core values and do things in the same high quality way, which costs money to do, right? And so I invested with my mother-in-law at the time in 2 hotels, and I actually went to new owner and new manager training at Choice Hotels, and it's a franchise brand. And I'm sitting there learning how to help my mother-in-law navigate in my spare time, the hotel that she was going to full-time operate. And it dawned on me, I totally could franchise our business. Could I find other people that were maybe business people that could, have the financial acumen and have the ability to scale a business and operationally execute, but had been through a personal experience like I had and had a passion and purpose and wanted a place to be able to make impact, knowing what our demographics were going to be. It made a lot of sense. And so could I select carefully franchisees and then teach them how to do what I had done? And I had documented everything or nearly everything on our first location, and then filled in any kind of missing pieces to replicate my second, and then be able to, kind of be able to do it a little easier on the third. The pieces I didn't think about is every state has different, laws. And so it was a little harder when I went to Florida and Pennsylvania. And I think franchisors frequently underestimate. They start from one base, and it's going to be just as easy a few states away. But I learned, franchising from being a franchisee, and I knew what support I wanted to be able to count on. I knew what marketing was going to be important. And so maybe I'll go back to Tracy's second question a little bit ago in terms of, and I'll connect those dots in terms of the BrightStar brand. When we first started, I had no money, right? I mean, I had a limited amount of money, and I just wanted to put it on like recruiting caregivers and providing great client service. So we were healthcare solutions for our first 2 years. But when we started thinking about branding, like Choice Hotels, and they're like, little catchy jingles on TV, we needed to be able to have a brand. And so we hired a professional branding company, and we went through what is this journey like? Our grandparents raise our parents raise us, and they've been there for us. And then something happens, and our parents and our grandparents age, and they need to be able to have their children help them. And some of those decisions kind of go back to the start of life, right? Like sadly, our parents helped make sure we were bathed and clean, and right. And now at the end of life, or as people get older, some of those things they can't do for themselves. And so you get back to some of those just really basic. And so the branding company said, well, what does that make you think about? And I said, in a respectful way, maybe there's something off of nursery rhymes, because every other brand that was in this space, home this or comfort this and whatever, and they all sounded the same. And so we put up on the board, Starlight, Star Bright, and Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. And Bright Star were the 2 words that came out. It was a couple of years, which is kind of embarrassing to say, before someone asked me the first question about the BrightStar brand and my last name Sun, because I had never thought of them. I'm not that way. I would never have the focus be on me or my last name. It's why our name's not in the brand. But it did start with kind of looking at nursery rhymes and going back to this full circle of life. And what are those stories that our parents and grandparents told us when we were kids? And now we're helping to take care of them in some intimate ways. And is there a way, in a respectful way, to have that be a subtle part of the brand without making it so obvious they're losing their independence, which they don't want to do?
Wow. I love that. I always love to hear about how a company is derived and how they got their name, because the stories, we hear of people putting their kids' names together, or just, something that happened that sparked it. But that's fascinating. And to me, that whole circle of life journey also kind of reminds me about the experiences that you've been talking about this whole time, where you started this company, it was hugely successful, and you had a passion and purpose. And then you became a caregiver, which elevated this whole other level of meaning onto the business, which then also brought it back full circle because now you're focused on professional development with your team. I mean, I don't know if I have a question in there somewhere, but this is just fascinating to me, truly.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's that full circle. There's almost this theme about full circle that Shelley has, which is pretty amazing.
Yes.
Shelley, I wanted to ask you, I'm guessing COVID really hit this space, this elder care space, quite hard. Can you tell us a little about that and how you navigated that? I mean, I understand that Glassdoor gave you an award of the 25 highest rated CEOs during COVID. So tell us a little bit about how you navigated COVID, and if there's any little tidbits we can get out of there that we can continue to use into the future.
Yeah, I mean, we reacted early. I mean, we started hearing enough that, and I still own 100% of my company. So if I was wrong, I was playing with my own money, and I didn't have a PE firm who was going to beat me up over it, right? And so I spent a lot of money like sourcing personal protective equipment. So, we put hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars into N95 masks so we could keep our caregivers safe. Sadly, it wasn't that it wasn't easy to implement. We were able to source from like 7 different countries, and I got PPE, but you're not able to actually have a caregiver or nurse wear an N95 mask without building an entire program around it. And the hospitals, it's normal for them to have a program because they're dealing with people with bloodborne pathogens. And so they got to keep the nursing personnel safe. But we'd never, like in this country, kind of had like this, rampant, bloodborne pathogen, and all the OSHA rules said I couldn't actually keep my caregivers safe without developing a respirator program, for the one-off chance that someone has asthma and the fit was wrong or whatever. And so that was probably one of the biggest challenges. I remember being on the phone with my counsel on a Sunday evening, like, I've got my N95 mask. I need to get them out. They're like, well, Shelley, OSHA would say you actually can't. You'd have millions of dollars of fines if anyone got hurt, and they could shut you down. And I'm on the phone. I'm crying. I'm like, I'm just trying to keep my nurses and caregivers safe and keep my clients safe, because there's not a vaccine. They're a vulnerable population, but they're still going to need care, and their kids can't get to them because they can't travel. And it was the most frustrating thing, but we powered through as we had to and got things in place, rolled out a respirator program. So I think the things we did well, I think we thought about our vulnerable clients. I think we thought about our caregivers that needed to come take care of their vulnerable clients, but they needed to get back home and be around their family. And how do we keep everybody safe in the nature of the kind of the transients of our workers? And so we did PPE early. And I think that's why, because what I loved about the Glassdoor, it's probably one of the things I'm the most proud about in my career, is it wasn't like an Inc. magazine or a franchise industry award that's just based upon the financials, or it's based upon growth. Glassdoor, rarely do you get a good guy on a Glassdoor, because where people go to say that they don't like their employer, right? But to have caregivers across the country that were working for the brand say that the founder, the CEO that was, kind of in charge, making sure they were safe, was doing everything that was right, or as much as possible that was right for the frontline staff. That's how that award came to be. So it was based upon Glassdoor looking at all of their ratings from frontline workers, pre-COVID and during COVID, to see who was taking care of that workforce. And so to then be top 25 and be the only woman, which surprised me, but be the only woman and the only home care services on that list when it mattered so much, gave me a huge moment of pride. There's a lot we had to navigate being a franchisor, getting everything out to our franchisees, having consistency. Our franchisees are spending a lot on PPE, on overtime, on incentive time, getting people to work. And so PPP and ERTC money was critical. And I was very hands-on. Like I maintained the spreadsheet to know which franchisees had gotten funding. We secured 2 national lenders to get franchisees through the PPP program. We had franchisees that were going with local banks. And then I would, okay, you got it. You've got 5 other franchisees in your area that haven't yet gotten their loan approved by one of these national. Can you reach out and ask your bank to do 3 more? And like we did this kind of like really hands-on for weeks. We got 100% of our franchisees a PPP loan, 100%. Because to me, it was all about business continuity.
Right.
If we could keep our franchisees having the money to incentivize the workforce, pay for the PPE, we could still keep servicing our moms and dads, grandmas and grandpas, and that was critical. And so that was kind of mission critical during that period of time. So I think there's a lot that it was stressful. There were a lot of hours. Rebecca knows a little bit about my past marriage, not always healthy. But I took my twin boys. One is special needs, and they were doing virtual school. I moved in with my ex-in-laws and ex-husband for 3 months so that I could support my healthcare business, support my franchisees, ultimately support the consumers we have the honor to take care of, and our workers that were doing the Lord's work on the front line, while also knowing my kids were going to be okay. And so, what are you willing to do when called? I think that's as much as I could have given. And I did for, 3 months. And so it allowed me to make sure that my kids were on virtual school, but also, running calls like 18, 20 hours a day with my brand and my franchisees. And so a lot went right. There were a lot of consumers, though, that felt scared about having someone come into their home. So the business did come down for a few months. A lot of where we have national account volume for our franchisees is like in the workers' comp space. You're likely not going to have many workers' comp cases start if all the employees are home officed, right? And working virtually, because most people weren't traveling at that point in time or going out in the community at that point in time. And so franchisees were kind of at risk of having business come down. And so we have a national accounts team. It's one of the things I think is the most innovative that we've done that others have not been able to spend the money to replicate. We started the program in 2008. By 2018, it was over $100 million and over 20% of our franchisees' revenue. It's now over 30% of our franchisees' revenue, but we needed to keep it going. And so where all can we go? Who's going to need our nurses? Who's going to need our people? Because if they don't need them in workers' comp, where do they need them? And we were honored to be able to be in airports screening people, to be at meat production plants screening people, so we all could still get our chicken and our beef and our pork. And we pivoted and went and called on the pharmaceutical companies and the clinical trial companies. And 600 plus of my nurses were ones that helped one of the COVID vaccinations get approved by the FDA because we participated in the clinical trials. And one of the first therapeutic drugs, we were part of that clinical trial as well. So, the innovative, the grit, the not taking no for an answer, that was so much of part of our founding in early days. We haven't lost it. We're still a nimble entrepreneurial organization, even though we're nearly $700 million in system-wide sales. We're a much different sized organization that we were, but a lot of that entrepreneurial heart and passion to make an impact, pivot, is still there. And I think we got to see that in COVID. I think what we didn't see is that I think you can miss, when you run a national franchise organization, the outliers. And so it's great to learn from your top outliers and help that training come back into your brand. But if you have some lower performing outliers, you might miss until you have something like a pandemic, where you have to expect that everybody's running the business model and that you're teaching them how to pivot from what is table stakes so that they can still be successful. And I think a lot of franchisors I talked to realized that they had some franchisees that were not actually running the business model as it should be. And so post-COVID, I think we're spending a lot of our time in 22 and 23, as are many other brands, really focused on consistency and compliance, not asking necessarily for more than has always been in our franchise agreement, but making sure if we have to do our side, and I think we did a lot Herculean PPP for 100%, you know, doing some of the advocacy that we did, getting some of the clinical trial business that we did so that our franchisees continued growing even during COVID. I think we did what we needed to do, but we need to be able to expect that our franchisees are doing everything they signed up for in every single agreement in every single territory. That's not a fun part of the evolution of a franchisor as you grow up as a brand, but it's a piece that we're kind of in now, but very necessary. And our moms and dads, grandmas and grandpas, and our workforce need for us to be making sure that bar is consistent and at the highest level.
I want to address that because that's so important. One of the benefits of franchising is just that, is consistency, that no matter where you're getting your service, whether it's Tallahassee or Tulsa, that you're going to get consistent quality service because this is under a brand. I think sometimes we have a negative feel around the word compliance, but there's a reason for it. So we have that especially in the health arena, right? There's a consistency in how we provide that service to our grandmas and grandpas and our Grammys, right? So that's super, super important. It's also what makes franchising work. It's also why some people should be franchisees and some people shouldn't. If you're someone that's not comfortable with that, that's a different story. If you're a wild west entrepreneur, franchising requires consistency, and that's also where the success comes from. It's so interesting to me because Tracy mentioned this full circle thing, because you are a trailblazer, innovator, a leader, but you've developed through your systems and processes and encouragement and love, leaders within BrightStar that have risen to the top and are representing this space, this industry well. So I have a question about that, because not only are you developing leaders within your franchisees, but you're also stepping out and doing some work with the University of Tennessee. Do you mind telling us a little bit about the future generations that we're hoping to get into franchising?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have, two really big passions: franchising and my alma mater, University of Tennessee, which is my phone cover. So I really am like a go Vols kind of gal. And so, I've been blessed. I've had great success. I've worked hard for it. I waited tables and put myself through school. So I don't come from money. I have built everything that we have. And so as success is given, I think we have responsibility to give that back. And that is charitable in a lot of ways for us and for me. But also, like, how do we think about income inequality that kind of is a tough thing in our country. Mm-hmm. And if we can expose more people to ways that they can create wealth, I think we'll all be benefited from that. And franchising is a great mechanism to do that. And so I'm very passionate about it from that perspective. And so I approached my University of Tennessee and said, look, I'd like to build a franchise program, multi-year, do an endowment to get that going. And we decided to start with a certificate program that was virtual to help those that are in and around franchising, vet it to make sure we were adding value. And then those that were future franchisees, we had two from the class. We just did the inaugural class of about 20 people. I got choked up on the graduation because we were giving out their certificates. And two minorities went together and are opening a franchise. They becoming a franchisee. Mm. And like, that's what we would want. And then one business was already on the path, but they got better learning from us to take a company owned and franchise it. And so that's exactly what we're kind of hoping to be able to do with that program. And part of that requirement for me with the university is I'm fine if we're charging for it with 3/4 of the class, but there needs to be enough seats where we can have minorities, women, and LGBTQ. I think there's like a little I or something after it now, but like, be inclusive, right? Like, as long as everybody's respectful, I don't care whether you're green, brown, orange. Well, orange is my favorite color because of UT, but yeah, that would probably be preferred. But, and I don't care who you love or what gender you want to, or binary or what, like, it doesn't matter. As long as you're kind. And my mother-in-law, Grammy, would have said that as well. just be kind, right? And so, but we want to give people access to this learning, even if they can't afford it. And that's why it was really important to me that we were increasing inclusiveness, increasing access, addressing income inequality, where not just those that could afford to do the certificate program, but others had specific set aside certificate scholarships to be able to participate in the program. And then, in the next few years, we will add some franchising curriculum to the undergraduate and build some internships with franchisors so people get exposed to franchising while they're going through their undergraduate journey, and then graduate school exposure to franchising and a financial incubator. So as they have ideas, people like me can put money into them and help them take it through a franchising model to a greater fruition, or become a franchisee and have people put it in and help get their wealth creation and just pay back the amount that's in the incubator. And then we can do it for multiple more students. And so it's a great way to help show the power of franchising and how it extends beyond so much more than a McDonald's, right? There's so many sectors that franchising is a part of. You almost be impossible to think of anything where there isn't a franchise as well. And it allows, the old saying, in business for yourself, but not by yourself. And we want to give more exposure to being able to do that. And so endowing this program was a way for me to be able to do something special with my university, as well as be able to expose more people to franchising earlier in their journey, which hopefully will make a big difference for them and their future generations to come.
Beautiful. I love how you're not just talking the talk, but you're walking the talk, right? The inclusiveness, the endowment to really get this initiative off the ground. There are a lot of people who say, we should do this, we should do that, but to really get it off the ground and be that driver behind it is incredible. I'd like to pivot just for a moment to your book. It was published 10 years ago, was it?
Mm-hmm.
And it is Grow Smart, Risk Less.
That's right.
So my question for you, Shelley, is if you were rewriting the book today, or you were adding to it 10 years later with all of your experience, what is the one thing that would have to be at the top of the list to include in that new version, the new revised edition?
I think the focus on consistency and having third-party relationships or monitoring mechanisms for the customer experience items that are so critical about the brand, to make sure there's monitoring systems to make sure those things are being executed upon. I mean, I'm envious of kind of how it must be easy to know whether your franchisee is executing at a McDonald's, right? Mm-hmm. You can walk into a McDonald's and see that the bathroom is clean or not clean. You can see that the French fries taste well, but the care that we're delivering are in people's individual homes. Mm-hmm. So making sure that quality is there, that consistency is there, is harder in service industry. So we, have had to, align with third parties to, survey customers. 5% of our customers go through a survey every single, and not a phone call. I mean, like an actual interactive phone call every single month. So, and we're gathering that and we're benchmarking our franchisees as to their net promoter score. Same thing with the caregivers in terms of employee net promoter score or employee engagement score. And so, what are the things that are important and what are the measurements that are kind of, black and white, whether they're there, right? And being able to use that to help a correction program if a franchisee's low to get that up to a brand standard. I think there was too much of an assumption, I think, on my part when writing it the first time, and probably my first 10 years in franchising, is that our franchisees are successful that follow the model. Why would you not follow the model? Mm-hmm. But I think, it can happen. And I think many franchisors would say, some franchisees and get like comfortable that they're following it and maybe start to know more than their franchisor. And why make that investment? Can they get good enough? And maybe the investment's 100,000 to net them 80, right? Or they spend, you know what I mean? But they spend 100 to get back 20. Like, well, do I really want to risk 100 to get back 20? And so I'm just happy with where my earnings are, right? And so it's a lot of what happens. And I didn't realize that early on because I was only, when I wrote the book, I was only a franchisor for, less than 10 years. But people really do kind of hit this plateau maybe of, do I really want to reinvent myself and adapt to new changing things in the marketplace? And some really don't. They really want to coast it. Go back to Blockbuster, right? Blockbuster, it was a franchise brand. The franchisees did not want to give up late fees, even though they knew customers hated late fees. And they filed bankruptcy 10 years after laughing Netflix out of the conference room, right? And I don't want that to happen to our franchisees that are unwilling to recognize that what has been great or status quo has to change. Medicare Advantage now pays for some of the services we provide. If we don't take Medicare Advantage, we're in the trust business. If we don't let our seniors use the benefit that they've, paid into, and we say you have to pay privately, even though government will pay for it, we've eroded trust. And we've missed a big segment of the marketplace. It doesn't make any sense. But those are the transitions that we're going through by understanding how the macro market has changed, how the healthcare ecosystem has changed, and we must change. But I think that in my book, I might not have given enough credit or had enough experience to recognize that when big changes occur, change management consistency will be necessary. And it means that some won't be able to come along for the journey. And so we're, having to, think about resale programs and things like that might not have been as critical or as essential 10 years ago, but are today, because you want your franchisees that were there with you in the early days to monetize. But if you're not willing to adapt, the brand has to. So maybe there's a different chapter for them that just doesn't include BrightStar, and it's delicate because you love them as people, but our vulnerable seniors need to be able to make sure that we evolve and that we're here as a brand 30 years from now. And that's going to require a lot of change management and willingness to adapt. And not everybody will be ready for that.
Yeah. This is actually one of my favorite topics, Shelley. One of the things we measure in the Zoracle tool is adaptability. It is one of 6 grit markers. And what's been really interesting as a behavioral scientist watching this and many other markers is at a time when we need to be most adaptable. We've gone through COVID, we got competition, there's new technology, there's new regulations, yada, yada. The overall scores societally in adaptability has actually dropped. So it's the old saying, he who is most flexible wins. We have to adapt, right? And we have to continue to innovate and see the future in a way that allows us to progress that direction. It is a grit marker. So this is a wonderful topic of adaptability. And the question I always have is it a thing that just says, I'm scared of change, that prevents us from adapting? Or is it, as you said, and I think it's important, that we just get comfortable, right? We get to a plateau. We have the amount of income we want. I don't want to change. It takes a lot of work to change. What is it that prevents us from thinking like what you're thinking? We must adapt. We must see the future and do things differently to stay a step ahead.
Yeah, I think it's probably different for everyone, but I think it's probably that people do get comfortable and change is hard. I think it's also that you get to an economic or financial level and you're comfortable and you're not willing to take that same risk. Every franchisee that joins a brand takes a risk because they're, paying a franchise fee and their initial investment range, and they don't know whether they're going to be successful. The model has been successful, but the franchisee has to execute, right? And so they're taking risk. 10 years later, are they willing to say, to take the same risk when the brand has a rebranding effort, or a PIP in hotel brands where you have to do kind of a facelift on the brand, or in our case, like, you need to add another personnel, you need to hire a recruiter because the labor market has gotten so hard? And are you willing to make that $80,000 investment if you don't know that you're going to have a return on investment on it, right? It's a leap of faith as to when brands evolve. And I think that the only way we can get on the other side of, I can't fix people that are unwilling to change. But what I can do, if they at least have the capitalization, is show them the path forward, show them that taking Medicare Advantage can work, show them that being willing to take maybe a lower rate reimbursement for more upside as we impact, quality of care and care outcomes. And by hiring a recruiter, I actually could grow sales enough to pay for the cost of the recruiter and then some. We've started buying back franchisees. And so, 18 months ago, I had 3 company-owned locations. I now have over 30. And, I'm putting my money again where my mouth is I'm going to show you that we can make these changes work and be net more profitable, but do more good, service more customers, employ more workers, take good care of them, and still have a good financial outcome. But I have a certain subset of my franchisees that won't buy into it until I show them. Right. Well, then I'm going to spend this next year. I'm going to invest heavily. I'm going to issue the white papers. I'm going to show them. And then if they're unwilling to change once we've proven it, they're not the right franchisees. I'm still committed to franchising. And I think some of my franchisees are like, oh, she's just not committed to franchising. She's buying back her franchisees. No, I'm committed to my seniors, and some of my franchisees won't evolve. So I'm going to show you the playbook. I'm going to show you the numbers. I'll be very transparent. And then if you still can't adapt, you're just not right for where the brand is going. It doesn't mean you haven't been great up until this point in time, but we're going somewhere where the industry is going and where our seniors need us to, and where reimbursement sources and payer sources are requiring us to go. Gone are the days in healthcare where you're just going to be paid an hourly rate regardless of what outcomes you deliver. You're going to be paid more if you bend the cost curve elsewhere and give good outcomes, but you're going to be paid far less if you're not doing those things. And so we've got to show the playbook for these new plays. But once we do, then hopefully we'll influence those that see the results to change. And if we can't influence change, we can't accept status quo. And we'll have to continue changing out prior legacy franchisees for new franchisees with fresh energy and a fresh approach. And the story is still yet to be written as to what the percentages of those are. But we're doing our hard work now to write the case studies so that we can hopefully influence more. My ideal would be 20% company owned, 80% franchise. But I'm willing to have more company owned to make sure that I can service the seniors who need to be able to count on me to be there for them.
This is a lead by example thing, right? So I admire that you did it from the beginning. You've done it all the way through, and you're going to continue to do it. It's hard to say follow me if someone hasn't seen someone do it. So you are leading by example. So I love where you are, and I love your heart. You've always known that. I love your heart for the seniors, for the caregivers, for the franchisees, and it shows in everything that you do. I hate to do this, ladies. We're top of the hour here. I'm sure Shelley has like 10,000 backed up meetings to go. Shelley, I want to make sure people can get hold of you, learn more about Bright Care. How would they get hold of you? How would they learn more?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for that. So for those that are interested in, they have family members who need care or want to look more at the offerings that our franchisees and our company-owned stores deliver, it's brightstarcare.com. And for those that might be thinking about, is this franchise opportunity for them? And do you meet the test to be able to evolve with the high standards that we require? brightstarfranchising.com.
Perfect. Tracy, I'm going to put it over to you to do what you do so well. On your final thoughts.
Usually I have this long-winded thing that I say to wrap it all up, but there's only one word that comes to mind. And I just feel like if I went to the dictionary right now and opened it up to the word proactive, I would see a picture of Shelley. That's what I feel. I appreciate how you just take charge, like whatever you can't find, you create. You prove it works, even, 10 years later, 20 years, 15 years later, whatever it is, well, we have to adapt. We have to change. I'm going to show you that it works. I'm going to put my money where my mouth is. I'm going to put my time and energy and effort where my mouth is. And I'm going to show you that this can be done. And I think you are a shining light in a sea. I totally take my
Thank
hat
you
off
for
to
that.
you. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
Yeah. Trailblazer, a proactive trailblazer, a pioneer. Thank you again, Shelley, for joining us. We really appreciate it. And for those of you listening in today to the Franchise Woman podcast, where passion and purpose collide, profits are made and relationships are forged, make sure to subscribe, make sure to share this interview with Shelley, and we'll see you next week on another episode.